So why did you decide to start the group?
Well, I didn't decide to start the group. I think that's a misnomer that most folks have. I didn't sit down one day and say, I'm going to form this organization. This organization grew out of like-minded conversations that were already happening. They're happening in your homes. They're happening in your churches. They're happening in the workplaces. They're happening on the streets. And these conversations, of course, are had by everyone, but when they start to be had by your veterans, when they're had by people who are registered voters, legal gun owners, homeowners, people who've actually bought into the social system fabric, who now begin to see a problem, those conversations begin to metamorphosize into a desire for someone to do something, someone to respond in kind to what we began to perceive was a nonstop occurrence of grievances, human rights violations against people of color in this country. And that the response by this country was not equal to the same events happening with people who were not of color, who received what appeared to be a better shake, so to speak, a better handed justice, a better everything. So what ended up happening was we did a lot of talking. And we're not talking young folks here. We're talking folks in their 40s, 50s, 60s, who have the history and the wisdom of remembering the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, to where we are today. If you've been back then, you can tell when we begin to go backwards. If you've never been there, you couldn't see it. We could see it. We begin to see more and more incidents that reminded us of things that we thought were long gone. We thought that because we had arrived at a certain level in our social development, that those things were things we could talk to our children about as this is how it used to be. I have a very hard time explaining to my child about the bygone era of lynching when there's suspicion that a lynching just happened. When we start seeing the Ahmaud Arbery case where white men hunted down a black man and killed him. This was not a police on civilian violence. This was citizen on citizen violence, reminiscent of Jim Crow. When we start seeing the resurgence of the Confederate flag, which I don't care how you try to talk, it's our heritage. Whose heritage? Because you have to remember, we're supposed to be the United States, not the we're united until we remember our history and you remember yours states. We're supposed to be the United States. So when we saw the resurgence of those symbols, as painful as they were, combine that with the activities of the last 5 years, going all the way back to Trayvon Martin and then coming all the way up to today with George Floyd, we see not things getting better, but getting worse. The formation of the NFAC was inevitable, but it more so grew around my actions. It was not something that I formed. When Ahmaud Arbery was killed, and I and a small group of my friends decided to pay a visit to Brunswick, Georgia, to find out why justice was not moving along as it should, maybe to give it a nudge, so to speak, and also to express to America that there is a demographic within this country that is able to exercise its constitutional rights to bear arms, peaceably assemble and address grievances to the government that was all black, that it was time for America to realize who was sleeping in their bed with them. Thus the NFAC